Okay.
Oh, there we
All
are.
right, we should be here. And thank you everybody for joining again. I'm so pleased to introduce Susan Kusel and her new book, The Passover Guest, which is based on another book that I think she's going to talk to us about. And she's also going to show us a few little Easter eggs that are hiding in the book as well. So, Susan, I'm going to turn it over to you to read. Thanks again.
Okay, all right. So yes, as Molly said, the book is based on a Yiddish story by. So it's a short story. It's not actually a folk tale. It's a originally written short story by I.L. Peretz. And when I was a kid, I my mom read me a picture book that this story had been based on, and it's called The Magician, and it's with wonderful drawings by Yuri Shulevitz. And this is the version that I just fell in love with and remembered forever and ever, and found it many years later in a Jewish library and just uh, couldn't get enough of it, and reread it and reread it and reread it. And but I wanted to change it, and I wanted more color and life, and I wanted a child, and I didn't want it set in the shtetl, and I wanted just all kinds of different things. So I started working on it, and about uh, this was the point that henna started being involved very early on. And after about 3 years, I pitched it rather unexpectedly to editor Neil Porter, who even more unexpectedly was interested. And uh, Neil and I have worked together on it for 6 years, and it's been a nearly 10-year journey with this book. So it is now out, and Neil is the greatest editor that anyone could ask for ever. I know that there are other writers listening, so you may be biased, but my editor is the best. And so I just wanted to show. You said Easter eggs, but I to call them afikomen hidden in the book, which is the piece of matzah that you search for on Passover. And one of the things that was very unusual is that usually an author and illustrator uh, don't speak to each other. The author creates, and then the illustrator creates, and at the end, maybe they meet, maybe they don't. But I got to know the illustrator of this book, Sean Rubin, very well. And all the major decisions still went through the editor, but we talked. We walked around Washington D.C. together. Neil and I also walked around Washington together, and we just shared things. We talked a lot about food. I think the most significant decision I helped make was whether or not there should be carrots in the brisket. I don't know if he went with my opinion on that in the end, but basically we just chatted about smaller things. But one of the things right at the beginning was that I said, well, there's going to be a big Seder, a big Passover meal in this book. And I have these really special Passover dishes, special china. And hey, do you mind using my china in the book? And so this is my china, and he used it all through the book. So it's kind of like finding gold bug, as I mentioned to Molly earlier. It's all through the book, and in fact, they go to a second seder, and that second seder also has my china pattern. So I think that's really amazing. So that's really special to me. And the last thing I wanted to show, and then I'll read the book, was I you never. This is a story time, and you never come as a librarian for 15 years. I know that you never come to a story time without a puppet. So, had to bring one, which is a friend of mine crocheted. This is the main character from the Passover Guest, and she made her entirely out of crochet, down to the buttons on the back of her coat.
Wow.
And what's really special about this main character is you'll hear her name is Muriel, and Muriel is my grandmother's name. And so every time the word Muriel is said, if I say it or someone else says it, like even in like a marketing note, and they say, Muriel did this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's my grandmother. It means so much to me. But what I didn't know until later was that this red beret that she's wearing here, um, belonged to Sean's great aunt. And so Sean put the red beret on her, which is really a great device because you can kind of track her as she moves through the book. But the hat means a lot to Sean, and the name means a lot to me. And so we kind of, without talking about it, created this character that means so much to both of us. So I think that's really cool. All right. So all that being said, um, oh, and I should also say, because I've been doing a lot of interviews, which is amazing. I can't believe everyone is asking me to be interviewed. So, wow. But the number one question that I have been asked, so I'll answer it, because I'm getting really good at answering this question, is why did we set, the book is set in the Polish shtetl because the writer was a Polish shtetl writer, so it makes sense. But the number one question we're getting is why set the book in Washington during the Great Depression? And the reason is, well, there were two reasons. Um, well, the Great Depression was editor Neil Porter's idea, where he said, well, they're penniless, they can't put food on their table. The Great Depression is a time period that makes sense. And I said, well, Neil, I don't want the Great Depression. It's so depressing. Like, who wants to write about the Great Depression? I want something else. And he left it be. And then, like, we came back. He said, so when do you want it? And I said, I don't know. What about, like, the 20s? And he's like, the Depression would work really well. And I'm like, yeah. And then, like, we came back again. And I'm like, how about this? And he said, the Depression? And I'm like, yeah. And then, like, the fourth time, I said, Neil, I have this idea. How about the Depression? And Neil said, gosh, Susan, the Depression? That's a great idea. Let's go with the Depression. So anyway, it's set in the Depression, and it ended up being a great idea because Neil has great ideas. And then the other thing was Washington D.C., and it kind of worked the same way in reverse, where I was like, hey Neil, how about Washington D.C.? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, Washington D.C. And he said, I don't know. And then Washington D.C. And then actually, this is interesting because Hannah and Karen are here. Neil came maybe 3 years ago to speak to the Children's Book Guild of Washington, D.C., gave an amazing speech. And while he was there, I had asked him to walk around D.C., which was in January, which was not the best time, and to walk around Washington, but as anyone who's ever attended an inauguration knows. And so we were walking around Washington, and that's when he got it. And he's like, hey, how about Washington, D.C.? And so, anyway, you, as I know, as I said, many of you are writers, making a book is about compromise. So I, I really loved the idea of DC. A lot of Jewish books are set in New York. They're set in the shtetl. I love Washington. I love the cherry blossoms. I love the buildings. There's an amazing Jewish community there. I wanted to highlight Sixth and I Synagogue, and I wanted to set it in somewhere new and fresh that we don't usually see in a Jewish book. Um, and I got Neil to agree with me. So there we go. So now it's in the Depression in Washington D.C. And what has been absolutely crazy is that in the last year, the Depression has had, unfortunately, a whole new meaning as we're going through a very difficult economic time. And in the last 2 weeks, the Capitol building and the images of it have had an additional meaning. But the inauguration celebration was at the Lincoln Memorial, which is a significant part of the book, and that's really fantastic to have that image too. So apparently we were all very premonition 6 years ago. So there we are, and that was an incredibly long introduction. Please forgive me, Molly, and off we go. All right. And this is this book that I have worked for so long and so hard, and I can't really believe that it is here. Wow. All right, so this is the Passover Guest. somehow, amazingly, by me, illustrated by the very talented Sean Rubin, um, edited by Neil Porter, and art directed by Jennifer Brown. Okay, this is the case cover, the what happens when you lift up the jacket, and I just love this so much. I love case covers, and I was so happy to see this one. It was just so special to have one of my own, truly. And and this one is just so terrific to me. Ah, sorry. Okay. This is the front end paper, and I told you that the cherry blossoms mean so very much to me, and I love seeing them here. So we're starting off. This is the Passover Guest. As I said, it's adapted from De Kunstlermacher, which is The Magician in Yiddish by I.L. Peretz. And this is our first image of the capital, although was not our main focus when we wrote the book. Um, and off we go. Muriel loved Washington in the springtime. The white buildings stood out crisply against the green lawns. The cherry trees burst into pink blossoms at the tidal basin. She could feel Passover in the air. The year 1933 was different. Her father, like so many others, had lost his job. Her family didn't have enough to eat even on ordinary days. It would be impossible to buy all the food needed for their Passover Seder. They didn't even have enough wine to fill the ceremonial cup for the prophet Elijah, who was said to visit every Passover Seder. So there was no need to rush home to prepare the holiday feast. Muriel walked slowly from the park and stopped to look up at Lincoln on his magnificent marble chair. A strange figure in rags juggling on the steps of the monument caught her eye. He looked as threadbare as the men on the street waiting in line for soup. As she watched, his brown hair turned red. The eggs, sorry. As she watched his brown hair turned red, the eggs he juggled became blazing candles. His shabby clothes turned into those of the finest silk. Muriel was amazed. She took her only penny and put it in the hat at the man's feet. He smiled at her. The sun is setting. Passover is about to start. You don't want to miss your Seder. My family isn't having one this year, Muriel answered. Are you sure? Asked the man. Perhaps you'd better hurry home. He sounded so confident that Muriel started walking quicker than she ever had before. She ignored the Washington Monument gleaming in the fading sunlight. She rushed past the White House without a second glance. Gradually, the stately buildings began to recede. When she got to her own neighborhood, her stomach grumbled as she smelled the delicious food from other Seders. The celebrations were smaller this year, but she could still see tables filled with food and windows shining with light. What could the man have meant? How could they have a feast without any food? Her feet went faster and faster. When she arrived home, she opened the door in anticipation, but she only saw the same shabby room with the spindly chairs and rickety table that had always been there. Her parents emerged from the shadows dressed in their best clothes for the holiday, even though there was no food on the table, no gleaming silverware, no wine set aside for Elijah. Every door will be open to us on Passover, said her father. Let us find another home where we can celebrate. As Muriel reached for the door handle, there was a knock. When she opened it, she saw the mysterious stranger standing there. May I join your Seder? He asked. You are welcome to share anything we have, answered Muriel's father. But this year we have nothing. I have everything we need, said the man. Muriel turned and looked again at the room. It was no longer shabby, but glowing with light from countless candles. The chairs were piled with comfortable pillows, and the food! There were mountains of tender brisket, oceans of flavorful soup, and fields of crunchy matzah. A magnificent Seder plate lay in the center of the table, complete with an egg, a shank bone, horseradish, parsley, lettuce, and harotzi. There was even a beautiful cup of wine for Elijah. Muriel hadn't realized she was hungry, but now she wanted to eat everything, even the horseradish. Muriel and her parents couldn't believe their eyes. After seeing so little food for so long, their house was now bursting with it. Can this really be? Her mother asked. How is this possible? Her father asked. He sounded nervous. Everything is possible on Passover, answered the man. Muriel could tell her parents were uneasy. She volunteered to ask the rabbi if they could proceed with this astonishing meal. She ran to the synagogue and found the rabbi about to start his own Seder. She told him about their mysterious guest and how a magnificent feast had appeared from nowhere. If you can pour the wine and break the matzah, then what you have described is a true miracle, said the rabbi. Can you show me your Seder? Muriel led the way, and the rabbi's curious guests followed. More people joined the procession as it passed other Seders. When they reached Muriel's house, the crowd was enormous, but the stranger was no longer there. Everyone crowded into the tiny house. They all managed to fit inside as the rabbi examined the table. They watched as the wine poured itself, and then the middle matzah broke into two and became the afikomen the children would look for later. The rabbi picked up a piece of matzah, crumbled it in his hand, and then blessed the meal. This is not an illusion, he said, but a Passover miracle. We may all enjoy this beautiful feast. There were enough chairs for all. Their own seders forgotten, the guests joined Muriel's family in their retelling of the story of Passover. They dipped their parsley in salt water and ate bitter herbs. Muriel asked the 4 questions about Passover. All the children searched for the piece of hidden matzah, which was found just before midnight. Muriel realized that in all the excitement they had forgotten to open the door for Elijah. But when she looked at his cup, there was not a drop of wine in it. Now she knew who the mysterious stranger had been. And then this is an author note, because I researched this to a ridiculous degree and just wanted to tell you all about it. And this is an illustrator note where Sean wants to let you know that he based a lot of his illustrations on illustrator Marc Chagall, which is very interesting. And then there's another image here of the Six and I Synagogue, which was featured in the book, and to me a very important Washington Jewish landmark. And then this is more about Passover. And right here is Hannah's name in the acknowledgments. Very well deserved. And then this is a scene of Washington, D.C. And then here's the end papers, and the cat is going the other way.
Thank you so much, Susan. That is such a beautiful book, I have to say. I loved it. I absolutely love it. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask? I can take them on Facebook and give them to Susan, or if anybody in our Zoom audience wants to speak up and ask a question, please do. If there's any questions.
I have
oh, yeah.
I have a question. I was just wondering if I know it's brand new, but I'm wondering if you've had a chance to read it to children, either a mixed audience or a Jewish audience, and how the children reacted.
I'm muted because I was trying to mute.
Okay.
Okay. So usually, like, we'd be doing this like at bookstores, right? And I'm a librarian, and I'd be doing it to my preschool, and I do have events coming up with children, but and I am, as you said, very curious to hear. I will say I've only read it to one child, which is my son, and that was incredible because he was like one when my aunt is coming. Oh, Okay. Um, he was, hi, Joan. Joan, can you hear me?
Now I can. Oh,
Oh,
I just
okay.
woke up.
Of course, my aunt is in Oregon, and so it's a little early for her. But thank you so much for coming. I just read the book, but I'm taking questions right now, so
Okay.
you're in time for that. So the question was, have I read it to a child, and if I did, what was the reaction? And I said because of the weird way with the virtual events, I haven't, except for the only child I read it to was my younger son, and that what was so interesting about it was that um, well, there were a couple interesting things about it. First, we waited. He was probably 1 years old when I started writing the book, and he's in fifth grade now. And Hannah's looking at me because she has known him, when he was a baby, and so as has Joan, obviously, and so what we did, we very purposely, my older son was involved with it, but my younger son, we were like, we're not going to read it until it's done. Like, we're not going to read the fold and gather. We're not going to read the drafts. We're just going to wait till it's a book. So when it was finally a book, when the box of books arrived, we sat down and we read it, and it was incredible. And what what he really liked at the end was, at the end, if you noticed, um, Elijah gives back the penny that was put in the hat. So the penny is back next to the cup. So she notices that the cup is gone, the wine is gone, but that there's a penny there. So I didn't do that. Sean, the illustrator, did that, and my son said, I don't know, maybe 17 times that that was what made the book. Like the book wouldn't have worked without the penny, and like it was all about the penny, mom. And I'm like, but I didn't even. Oh, so he also noticed, and you think that I would have noticed this, but I felt like such an idiot. There's a line in there that says, she never opened the door for Elijah. She said, Mom, she did open the door for Elijah. And I was like, oh, duh, yeah, she did. Um, but it's just such a part of the story. It's in the original story, that opening of the door, that I never really thought about it. and and I've written like 50 drafts of the story, and so I just, you
Did
know,
he, Susan, did he know the original story? Had you read the original book to him?
no, he hasn't. I'll have to read the Yuri Shelovitz version. And actually the Yuri Shelovitz version, which Yuri translated himself, um, is in fact only an adaptation. And I've since read like 12 more direct translations of the Yiddish, and I had uh, unfortunately just passed away last month, but this amazing Rabbi Laszlo Berkowitz, um, translated for me, sitting in front of me, word for word, with every Yiddish idiom. He translated the entire story for me, and that helped me understand in a way that all the published translations did not. One of the very first things Neil said to me in the first meeting was, you need a Yiddish translation. And I said, well, I have 12. And he said, no, you need another one. So it's like he knows what he's doing or something. I don't know.
Well, I have to say, I feel like all these little things, all these details, and all the time that you spent on it really shows, because I feel like the story is pitch perfect. Like it just, it's beautiful. It's just a beautiful book. And I didn't notice the penny at first until you just pointed that out. And I think that's wonderful that the illustrator picked that up in your story, that it was so well told that he was able to, get that and put that detail in. I love it. I think that's wonderful. That's really great. Congratulations. Do
Yeah,
we
I think it's brilliant, actually.
I agree.
What he said, the illustrator said that it was one of the very first notes he made when he read the manuscript was to put that penny in. That occurred to him instantly.
Wow, that's fantastic. I
Yeah.
love that because you can see the collaboration. It obviously comes off just so perfectly in the book. So,
And then also I should note, he that penny that I just showed you, he looked up what a 1933 penny looked like, and he modeled it on that. But also, I picked the Lincoln Memorial because I thought the Lincoln Memorial was, to me, is a real kind of town square. In the original, it's in a shtetl kind of Fiddler on the Roof sort of place, and there's a town square. And so I needed a town square in Washington, and to me, the Lincoln Memorial has that quality. And when I took Neil there, and I said, Neil, this is DC's town square. And it was actually his first time at the Lincoln Memorial, which was really special to take him there. And he said, no, it's not DC's town square, it's the nation's town square. And I was like, oh, that's cool, that's deep. Anyway, but so I picked the Lincoln Memorial for that reason, right? And then I picked the penny because it was the Depression and she had no money, and it was the smallest amount of money. Well, what Sean did, this is how like an illustrator can collaborate you without you even talking to each other, is that he took that page and he made the whole page copper colored, because Lincoln, of course, is on the penny, which is something that never occurred to me when I picked either Lincoln or the penny, but is something that he saw, and then did again with that penny at the end, by representing the Lincoln Memorial at the end. So it's so interesting how someone, Hannah, I know you have had some really amazing illustrators work with you, or do these amazing books for you, and it's really amazing what the illustrator can do when they're over here and you're over there.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that. Oh, go ahead, Hannah.
Oh, I was
Please.
just going to ask a question. It's stunning, Susan. It is beautiful. Congratulations. Oh my gosh. And I mean, having read early drafts of it, like I see, I mean, you had the story from the beginning. I feel like, I can see that it's been like, refined a little bit or polished a little bit, but, I was expecting something maybe more different than it ended up being. And I was like, oh, yay, she's telling me her story that I already know. So
I think, was it set in DC?
it was, yeah. When I read it, and I remember you were very committed to that idea. So I'm glad that it stayed there.
Yeah,
And,
it was not, when Neil first saw it, it was like very vague and ambiguous. And in the first minute of the first meeting, he said, okay, where and when. But the ending, that last line, changed, I think, 50 times. I think every draft that we did, there was a new ending. Like
yeah.
and the running to the synagogue scene changed 50 times.
Yeah, I noticed some changes, and I don't remember every line, but the essence I felt like was very much the same story, and the illustrations. Oh my goodness,
Right?
Stunning. So fun to see it come to life, and the dishes, like that's amazing.
I know, it's so, they really here, I'll bring it back, but doesn't it?
That's incredible.
It's really incredible. I wasn't expecting. What's funny is that I have a whole place setting, right? I have the big dishes and the little dishes and the salad plates and whatever. And I took a picture of every single item I owned. I mean, I must have sent him 40 pictures. But this is my favorite plate. And there's a word for it, accent plate. Right? And he liked this plate of the 40 pictures I sent, which happens to be my favorite plate. But did you see that the rabbi was also using these dishes? Because I think that's hysterical. Like, did he also register at the same time?
Well, so my question to you, it's beautiful, is when you were reading the pages, that was the full spread, right?
Yeah.
And so in the book, is there, since I haven't gotten my copy yet, is there a
Oh, you
line?
will. It's coming.
Yeah, I'm excited to get it. Is there a line in between, or is it just a fold, like just a crease?
No, so he didn't do any spot art.
Okay. Yeah.
Everything is a full spread. There's not one, so spot art is like when you do here and here and here and here. He didn't do that at all. He just did complete.
Okay. Yeah.
And then what's interesting too is the way he did I actually got lucky and saw all the original art, which is, again, unusual. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that's unusual. And what Sean did is he draws in pencil on like white Bristol board, which is maybe twice the size of the book. And so he draws in pencil and he cross hatches. I don't know if you could see it, but he everything he does, he cross hatches. So like he makes X's as he draws. And then he scans it onto the computer, and then he adds color. And sometimes the whole thing is on the original, and sometimes it's not. And what's interesting is when I saw the original art for this page, only the people are on the original art. The entire Lincoln Memorial was drawn on the computer, which is very interesting. But then if you look at a scene like this was all original art. So it just depends on what he decided or how he wanted to change the art. So, but there's no color at all on the original art. It's interesting.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Really, really happy for you.
Well, thank you, Henna, for everything that you did to make this a book. And I just want to, I'm happy to take more questions, but I just don't want to forget to thank Rachel Woods, who is the owner of Scrawl Books, who I have known for well over a decade. And we were colleagues together when we both worked at the public library. And Rachel is a dear, dear friend. And it is an honor, an absolute honor to do this event at her store. I wish I could be in her store, but it's an honor to do it at her store. And I'm always thrilled to see her. And she even brought the books to my house yesterday to sign it. So Henna, I signed your book at my house. And I just can't say enough things about Scrawl Books. Really, I have supported them from the beginning, and they have been supplying me with books all through the pandemic in a wonderful, speedy way, and I give them 10 thumbs up. So.
Well, thank you for that. That's so nice. We really appreciate it. And Rachel is a wonderful person, so I'm happy to work here as well. But thank you so much for being here. Do we have any other questions from our audience or our Facebook group?
Well,
hi. Susan, I'm just curious to know if you have any idea of the pre-sales or the sales so far.
It's hard to tell because, you can buy the book anywhere. And I do know that I signed 120 copies for the pre-orders that I did at another bookstore, but we won't say their name because we're at this bookstore now. So that was really exciting. And as Karen and I were talking about earlier, since the book has gotten so many starred reviews, a lot of libraries are buying it. And so you're not seeing those in like kind of main sales channels because they're going to buy them through Baker and Taylor and Ingram, which are wholesalers, Follett. So I think I'd have to wait until I got like a royalty statement from the publisher. I've never been on this side. Henna would know more than me and Karen, who are authors, but seems like people are getting the book, which is astonishing to me. I thought I was going to sell a couple copies to my mother. So anything beyond that. And I will say, because I talked about this at the beginning, Joan, before you got here, but I mentioned that the main character was based on Muriel, my grandmother, and Joan is one of Muriel's daughters. So I just wanted to.
And it makes me have me cry every time I hear the name because she's remembered in so many houses now.
She's an incredibly special person, a unique individual.
Agreed.
Yeah. So it's so cool to have her name in this book. And I'm trying to think. What did I miss, Molly?
I don't think you missed anything. I feel all these details that you're telling us, it makes the story all the more special, and I love it. I just think it's such a great book. I really can't say enough good things about it. So thank you so much for doing this. Do we have any other questions? Well, if not, go ahead.
I think I asked a question of everybody there, right? I really appreciate everyone's support. I mean, it has just blown me away. I wasn't expecting it. I know I've been around the book industry as a book buyer, as a librarian, for a very long time. I know how hard it is to launch a book. I know how hard it is to keep holding it up and asking for attention. And I wasn't expecting any. And so I appreciate all the people who have gone to great lengths to they have held up the book and they have asked for attention for me and they have promoted it. And I am more grateful than I can put into words.
Well,
Susan, people are going to ask you, what do you have? What's next for you? And are you working on another book? You're going to get that question a lot.
Oh, I have already.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is very typical of me. I am working on like 6 books. And so there's no publisher contract or anything at this point, but I would say that most of them are Jewish, and I really believe in telling Jewish stories. And I I also want to say, and of course, being me, they're at all levels. They're, picture book and middle grade and early reader, and I can't settle to one thing. But I hope my agent either enjoys that or can put up with that. But I also want to say that one of the really interesting things I mentioned earlier, this writing group that Hannah, Lisa, and I were in, and one of the things that was really helpful about it was that I'm Jewish, that I may have outed myself by this point, and Hannah is Muslim, and I think we know that now, right, Hannah, based on your author career. And Lisa is Catholic, and to have two people from other religions offering advice and opinions on the book was super helpful early on. And to be told, like, so who is Elijah? And that really helped me strengthen the book. If I had just been kind of talking to the in crowd, it would have been much harder to accomplish. And so that really helped me from right from the start, and I appreciated that feedback. And I think we did that for each other's stories, right? So whatever Hannah wrote or whatever Lisa wrote, we were able to be there for each other. So I think it's interesting to share cross religions like that. What do you think, Hannah?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Um, and I'm sure I was asking a lot of the questions, but the assumptions that we make, it's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
familiar to us that we think, oh, I'm just saying this and other people are going to understand what this is, of course. And so to have that, someone else be like, wait a second, I'm not familiar with this. And you were exactly that for me when I made all sorts of cultural and religious assumptions and be like, wait, what is that again? So, but also doing it in a way, what I love about your story is that it doesn't feel teachy. You're not explaining what everything is. But we understand through context. We understand, and if we have further questions, obviously you have a note, and we can research more. But I love the way that you're providing a story for Jewish families and non-Jewish families, but you're not. It's not. It doesn't feel like a textbook. It feels like a story, and there's nothing. And if you learn something great, or if you see yourself great, but it's a story. Really lovely one.
Well, that's great. Neil helped me a lot with that to kind of find the balance between that. And I also had 6, so in addition to having people outside my religion, I had 6 consultants. I had 2 Reform, 2 Conservative, 2 Orthodox Jewish consultants um, that helped me figure out what was going on correctly. Because just because I'm Jewish doesn't mean that that's the only way of seeing things. So I asked them for their advice. And then in addition to that, I had 3 rabbis who also went through it. So 9 or 10 people by the end of it. And there's a famous Jewish saying, which is 2 Jews, 3 opinions. And I think I had 5,000 opinions. Everybody saw it a different way. In addition, the editor is Jewish. The illustrator is Jewish. So they had their own opinions as well. So there was a lot of work. I mean, like, I can't even tell you the amount of effort it took to get the harotzis right, and was the harotzi lumpy enough or not lumpy enough, and was it brown enough, or did it need more nuts, and oh my gosh, and the vav didn't look right like the resh looked, and it needed to be shortened, and PJ Library had a problem with the length of the resh, and anyway, so there was a lot, but I think that I think it all came together, And I think that opinions from everybody is appreciated. I think it makes a difference. I think we make an assumption. It wasn't until Hannah and Lisa said, "Who's Elijah?" that I went, "Oh my gosh, how could, what? Elijah?" Like, I just take it for granted. It was like asking who's Santa Claus. And so I was so grateful for them for doing that and for providing that window for me.
Did you I'm just, so I'm coming from a secular humanistic Jewish
Oh,
perspective.
wonderful. Yeah, that's a great
Education
branch to
director
come
for
from.
a school. And I think that it's fantastic your timing on this, because it sets it up so we can do it. And especially this year with everything having to be online, like the story is so pertinent to people aren't having their own seders in their own homes. And
Yeah.
so
We planned
like
that
the
all
timing,
6 years ago.
how did you figure out the timing on that and make it perfect? Like, was that just coincidence?
You mean like the depression or the fact that they all moved to the house?
No, I'm thinking in terms of your publication dates. Like,
Uh,
having it out right now, like, it's perfect timing for setting up, using it this year in our school. So
well, do you want the real honest to God answer, which is
sure.
that the book was delayed and was supposed to come out last year?
And the other special part was that it was launched or came out on
Yeah.
my birthday. So
Yeah.
thank you for the gift.
So there we go. So it came out all perfectly because it came out on my aunt's birthday. But you never know, right? So it was actually supposed to come out February 2nd last year, and then
Okay.
because of delays it came out this year, but it had to be moved back to January 19th because Passover was earlier this year than it was last year. So it sounds like it's an amazing coincidence, but really it had to do with publication schedules. That's the I see Karen and Hannah laughing because they know the truth of that, right?
In hindsight, are you glad? Are you glad that it's this year, not last year?
Yeah, I am. I mean, I think that last year, well, first off, we didn't know this pandemic was happening. Um, when I got the email from my editor, I was maybe not jumping up and down, but the book is better that it came out now. I think it's a better book, and the book is going to be out forever, right? So you want a better book, and it's if you had to wait a year for the book, then as you know, with a holiday book, it can't just move from spring to fall. It has to come out a year later. So yeah, so I am glad that it is a better book. I believe that it is, uh, and I'm very happy about that. Um, I think last year everyone was figuring out what the pandemic was and how to deal with it. And I think like now, like, here we are, and Molly is like, I'll send you the Zoom link and we'll do this because we've done it so many times. Like everyone's just like, oh, virtual event, no big deal. And I think if we had done it last March, it would have been like, virtual event, and so yeah, I think I'm glad. Did you have any books come out last year, Hannah?
Right at the beginning of the pandemic, and
How did that
the
go?
picture book. We hadn't planned a ton of publicity stuff around it, so it just sort of came out into the world.
And I
um,
think a lot of that
yeah.
happened. I'm in a group called the Soaring Twenties, which is a group for picture book debuts in 2020, and everybody had this problem. A couple people got in right before, but even then, they still had to promote it during the pandemic. And but they all, I think it's been a tough time to debut. It's been a tough time for more seasoned authors. It's been a tough time for bookstores. It's been a tough time for libraries. So I think it's been a tough time for the book industry. And which is why I keep buying from independent bookstores to get me through this. So
I'm curious about the original artwork. Who keeps it? What happens to it? Is it possible that you will get any of the originals?
so I think that varies by artist. right? I mean, it's their work, they own it. Some people exhibit it in museums, some people put it in shows, some people gift it to people, some people sell it. So I think what happens with it in this particular case, Sean has offered a piece to me,
Oh,
uh,
wonderful.
and we're figuring out what piece that is and how to get it to me. And it's the sweetest offer anyone has made me, maybe ever, because I have a collection of, as Hannah knows, because it's at my dining room table where we've done all our critique meetings. I have a collection of original artwork from books, and to have a piece of art from mine is beyond, I can't even say. So anyway, it was quite exciting to see it because he was like, "Oh, here's a piece. Oh, wait, here's another, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another, and another." And I just like my face melted, and I may have fallen under the table. But it was quite an experience because to me, original artwork is extraordinary. I mean, a book can kind of capture it, but it can't really. And when you see it, the artwork is bigger, it's smaller, it's more vibrant, it's always so different. I am obsessed with original artwork, and I've been lucky enough to go to the Eric Carle Museum, which, in addition to celebrating Eric Carle, they curate original artwork from children's books. And so I have seen original artwork there, including where'd it go? Oh, here. Um, I was lucky enough while I was at the Eric Carle Museum to see original artwork from this book,
Nice.
which was really amazing. So,
That's awesome.
and now I'll have a piece of my own, and that will be pride of place.
So had you known the illustrator at all prior to working with him?
No, funny story. We do I have a few minutes, Molly? Okay. Funny story. I was at a conference. You go to a lot of conferences in my line of work. And I was at Book Expo, which you probably know through Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
And my editor, it was in New York, and my editor had just told me in his office, like minutes before in Manhattan, he said, "Okay, this is who it's going to be, and we're done, and we signed the contract, and it's over." I said, "Great, this is going to be great." And I went from his office back to the conference, and I was on the floor, and I ran into a librarian friend, and I said, "Hey, guess what? This is who it's going to be." And I said, "Come with me." And I took her over to the booth where Sean had just published his first book. And I said, "Here, look, here's his book." And we walk over to the booth of this smaller publisher that he had a book out with. And we walk over to the booth, and the marketing person comes over because we're like falling over the book. And she says, excuse me, he says, "Oh, do you like that author?" And I'm like, "Oh, do you like that illustrator?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're really interested in this illustrator, super interested." And he's like, "Oh, well, he's going to be at a party tonight that we're hosting." And I was like, He is? How do I get an invitation to that party?" Um, and anyway, so I met him that night, and then shortly after, he came to DC, and we walked around DC, and then we became friends, and in fact now we're very close friends, which has been really amazing, actually, really great. And he's very sorry he can't come today. He moved yesterday. Otherwise, he'd be here. Which I think is a decent excuse.
Yeah.
You have so many serendipitous moments bringing this book together. I love it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, and actually that next day at Book Expo, so after I met Sean that night, the next morning, I somehow miraculously got into the same room at the same time, my editor, my agent, the illustrator, and me. And Henna's like, "Wow, that never happens, right?" That's not possible, right? So we had a half-hour conversation right at the beginning of starting the book together, like a half-hour meeting, and I that was pretty special to be able to kind of say, here's what we all want to do together. And I don't think that ever happens in publishing. Yeah, see, you're shaking your head. Like what? What did you do? What kind of wizardry is that? Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome. I have photographic evidence to prove it because no one would believe me otherwise.
That's fantastic. Do we have any other questions? Any other comments? Well, again, thank you everybody for being here. On Facebook, we have an audience as well. So thank you everybody.
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
Hello, Facebook.
Yes, Facebook. So I've offered if any comments or questions, I'm happy to pass them along to you. So, but the video will also be up there for a while. So thank you again for being here, Susan, and thank you for bringing this beautiful book into the world. We really appreciate it. And it was so nice to meet you. Thanks all. I'm going to sign off now from Scrawl Books, where we have plenty of copies signed and ready for you. So thank you very much.
And Hannah, your copy is coming soon.
Thanks, everybody. Bye, Susan. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for coming, Joan.